Airport music always sounds like it's meant to hide loneliness, as if someone decided that a soft jazz playlist could drown out people's unfinished stories. Maggie Collins stood in line for her flight from Seattle to Denver, thinking how her life had boiled down to two places where she still allowed herself tea: home and airport gates. At home, because it was quiet. At the airport, because nobody asked why she was quiet. Someone laughed behind her. The laugh was young but nervous, like silverware clinking inside a drawer. Maggie turned her head. He was tall, holding his phone, half turned toward the window. Blonde hair, sharp jawline, the same kind of profile she used to trace with her fingers once upon a time, the kind that made your chest tighten with old, unnecessary memories. "Excuse me?" she whispered to no one. "That can't be him." The young man smiled at something on his screen, then glanced toward another gate, where an older man sat behind a newspaper. Maggie's heart stopped. The paper looked unread, edges bent, as if held only for cover, and when he lowered it, the years collapsed into a single second. Richard. Same carefully chosen shirt, same controlled posture, eyes still cold, always a few degrees below forgiveness. 10 years ago, he had left on a short business trip that stretched into forever. Divorce papers came later, neatly folded with his lawyer's smile, everything but the truth. The young man behind her caught her glance and smiled politely, the way kind people smile when they feel a stranger's pain but don't understand it. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he asked softly. "I am," Maggie nodded. "Just thought I saw a ghost that should have stayed dead." "Strange day. Someone called me a younger version of my investor this morning, like I'm his clone or something." "And who's the original?" "My new investor," he said, shrugging. "We've never been close. My name's Evan Hale." Hale, a name that sounded like a sigh. "Nice to meet you, Evan," she said. "I'm Maggie." He smiled again, warm but distracted. Then she saw Richard glance up from his paper, eyes meeting hers for just one frozen heartbeat, that awkward half-recognition of two people who used to share a home and now share only silence. A flight attendant's voice cut through the moment. "Attention passengers, boarding for Flight 482 to Denver has moved to Gate C12. The crowd began to move, waves of people dragging their stories behind rolling suitcases. When Maggie looked up again, Evan and Richard were close enough to touch, though they didn't seem to know each other, not as father and son, not yet. "You know him?" Evan asked casually, not realizing how wooden that question sounded. "Once," she said. "A long time ago." Their seats ended up side by side, 14B and 14C. Richard sat several rows behind. "You heading to Denver for business or running from something?" Evan asked, buckling his seatbelt. "Business," she replied, "but running too, from things that never learned to stay put." As the plane lifted off, the sky unfolded like a clean page. Maggie thought of another morning, years ago, coffee going cold, a note left on the counter. "Don't wait. This isn't yours." He'd always been economical with words and wasteful with promises. "I'm pitching my startup tomorrow," Evan said. "My investor will be there. Tough guy, but he gets things done. I raised myself, so simple stuff impresses me. Breakfast at 7, keeping your word, women who smile with their eyes." Maggie smiled faintly. "Do people compare you to him often?" "To him?" "The man you don't want to become." Evan chuckled. "Sometimes, but I'm still too young to be mad at my shadows." The plane climbed through thin clouds. Cities always looked smaller from above, even the ones that once held your whole life. She closed her eyes, hoping memory would miss her this time. When she opened them again, the flight attendant was leaning in with a tray. "Miss Collins, would you like something to drink?" We have Earl Grey with bergamot today. She smiled. Every woman over 60 deserves her cup of tea in the sky. And every man over 70 should learn how to say sorry. At baggage claim, two things happened almost at once. First, Richard finally looked directly at Evan, and there was no warmth there, just evaluation, like a man inspecting an investment portfolio. Second, someone spoke her name in the tone only old friends use. Maggie! Maggie Collins! She turned. Daniel Reed. Gray coat, kind eyes, hands that still knew how to fix things. The former air traffic controller turned bookstore owner. I thought you left this city. I did, he replied with a smile, just landed somewhere quieter, between paper and people. Evan lingered a moment nearby. Richard noticed Daniel, frowned slightly, and looked away. Between those two men, a look and a past that never learned how to sleep. If you're heading downtown, Daniel offered, I can drive you. And there's something you need to hear. What is it? It's about the Redwood Harbor Foundation. That name hit her like a quine dropped into an old jar, familiar, heavy, and echoing from another life. Richard approached, adjusting his cufflinks. Maggie, I see you've met Evan, promising young entrepreneur. We work together. We work together. His favorite trick, using business as camouflage for guilt. You two are alike, Maggie said evenly. Both think the world's your stage. Difference is, only one of you knows how to listen to the audience. Don't start, Maggie. Today's not the day. There's no wrong day to stop pretending. He hesitated, just long enough for her to see regret flicker behind his eyes, then walked away. Evan looked at her, unsure. If you ever want to talk, without all that, he nodded toward Richard, you can find me through Hailtech. I don't always know what I'm walking into, but I still recognize strength when it stays silent. And then, he too, disappeared into the moving crowd. Daniel and Maggie stepped into the crisp Denver air. Tell me, she said. It's about the Redwood Harbor Foundation, and a signature that isn't yours. As they drove onto the highway, Maggie felt the past buckle its seatbelt in the back seat and breathe down her neck. Go on, she said softly. Let's open it. The Porchlight Books bookstore always smelled like coffee and paper. Not the crisp, sterile kind fresh off the press, but the kind that has lived beside people long enough to carry their warmth. Daniel never swept away all the dust. He said dust was just memory in another form. Maggie sat at a round table by the window. A teapot, a notebook, and her old tablet rested before her. The same one she used years ago when she helped Richard start his first charity initiative. Redwood Harbor Foundation, she read quietly. I remember that name. We created it to support veterans' families, but then everything drifted away. To his hands, Daniel said gently, and it seems not only his. The bell above the door rang and a woman stepped in, elegant, mid-50s, wearing a rain-scented green coat. Maggie Collins? She asked. I'm Nora Fields, attorney. I've been trying to reach you for years. Maggie frowned. Find me? Why? Because you're still officially listed as a co-founder of Redwood Harbor Foundation. And right now, money is being withdrawn under your signature. Millions. The words hung in the air like cold breath. Maggie froze, fingers tightening on her teacup. That's impossible, she said. I haven't had anything to do with that foundation in over a decade. Nora laid several printed documents on the table. Each one bore Maggie's name, her handwriting, her signature, only not hers. This isn't me, she whispered. I know, Nora replied, but someone wants it to look that way.
Silence filled the bookstore, thick as smoke. Daniel reached across the table and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll get to the bottom of this." Nora leaned in. "There's something else," she said. The forged signatures began appearing after the trust was re-registered. The new beneficiary's name is Evan Hale. Maggie's head snapped up. Evan? The young man from the flight? Yes, Nora confirmed. He's now a contractor for Redwood Harbor. My guess is he has no idea he's walking into someone else's mess. The next day, Maggie and Daniel drove to the Foundation's office, a red brick building on the waterfront, its polished brass sign too new for an organization founded 15 years ago. A young assistant greeted them. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you can't enter without an appointment." "Then tell Mr. Collins that his past has come to visit." The assistant hesitated, then made a call. Moments later, the door to the executive suite opened. Richard appeared, immaculate as ever. "I always said," he began smoothly, "Maggie had perfect timing, always arriving when least convenient. I came right on time. You're just late to decency." He smirked, that familiar brittle smile that never reached his eyes. "I'm not hiding, Maggie. Redwood is business. You always confuse charity with sainthood. And you always confuse money with meaning." For a second, silence settled. Only the ocean outside spoke. "You forged my signature," she said quietly. "Prove it," he replied. "I will. But first tell me, why drag a young man into this? He doesn't even know you're using his name." He hesitated, adjusting his cufflink. "Evan isn't my problem. He's business." Maggie's voice trembled, but her words cut like glass. "He's your son." A muscle twitched near his temple. Then he turned toward the window. "Don't start. You don't understand. On the contrary, I understand everything. You ran. From me, from responsibility, and now from your own blood." He stared at the sea as if it could rescue him. "Some stories are better left unfinished. Not the ones that start with lies," she replied. That night, Maggie sat on the balcony with a letter Nora had handed her before leaving. It was written years ago, addressed to her, but never sent. The signature at the bottom read, "Daniel Reed." "Maggie, if you're reading this, it means I never found the courage to say it out loud. You deserve to know Redwood Harbor keeps more than money. It holds records that can clear your name. If you ever have to stand in front of him again, don't be afraid. Some of us still remember who you were and who you became." She read it twice, maybe 3 times, then whispered into the night, "Maybe it's time to stop waiting for someone to save myself. Maybe it's time to save myself." Far above, a plane crossed the sky, a silver streak of motion. And Maggie thought, truth is like the sky, always there, even when you forget to look up.
When truth arrives, it doesn't knock. It simply opens the door. That morning, Nora called before sunrise. "Maggie, I double-checked the trust records, and I found something." Her voice, usually so professional, carried hesitation. "Say it," Maggie urged. "In the registry, it states, Evan Hale, beneficiary of the trust established by Richard Collins, 2001. Maggie blinked. 2001? He would have been 3 years old. Silence. "So, you're saying—" "Yes," Nora said quietly. "Evan is Richard's son, born after the divorce." The words hit like ice water. Maggie sat at the small hotel kitchenette, staring into a cup of coffee gone cold. All those years, the business trips, the unexplained absences, the math finally fit. "And her mother," she whispered. "She passed away," Nora replied. "Richard took unofficial custody. The boy was later placed with a foster family. Grew up thinking he had no one." Maggie said nothing. Inside her, emotions moved like storm clouds: betrayal, sorrow, empathy. For the first time, she understood the strange familiarity in Evan's eyes, the same shape as Richard's, but without the frost. Hours later, she stood outside an old hangar on the edge of Denver. Evan was flying a drone, capturing footage for his new project. When he saw her, he smiled with genuine warmth. "Miss Collins, didn't think I'd see you again." "I need to talk to you," she said simply. He powered off the drone, sensing her tone. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have, but it's not mine." She took a deep breath. "Evan, do you know who your father is?" He laughed, short, nervous. "No idea. And honestly, I stopped caring years ago. My mom died when I was 6. The rest was foster care, part-time jobs, college. I built my life from zero. I'm not one of those people who go digging into the past." "What if the past finds you?" "Then I'd tell it it's too late." "Your investor? Richard Collins?" "Yeah. What about him?" "He's your father." He froze, then let out a dry laugh. "Nice one. What is this, a test?" "I wouldn't have come if it were." His face went blank. Then something broke in his expression. Not anger, but disbelief. "That explains everything. His coldness, the distance. He never saw me as a partner, just a reflection of something he couldn't face. He lied to both of us. But now we can decide what to do with the truth." Evan turned the drone remote in his hands like a coin. "You don't do anything with truth," he said quietly. "You just live with it." That evening, Maggie returned to Daniel's bookstore. The light from the lamp glowed on the window glass. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon and baked apples. "You look like you've seen a storm," Daniel said. "I have," she replied. "And for once, I didn't run." She told him everything about Evan, Richard, the forged documents. Daniel listened in silence, his steady calm wrapping around her words like a blanket. "And how do you feel now?" he asked gently. "Angry," she admitted, "but not at him, at myself, for once letting someone else own my silence. You've always been stronger than you thought you were. You just never allowed yourself to be weak next to someone safe." Maggie lowered her gaze. "And now there's you." He smiled, softly, like a man who's made peace with time. "And I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, Nora brought updates. "I've got the documents that could take Richard down legally, but we have to move carefully. I'm not here to destroy. I just want accountability." "Same thing," Nora sighed. "Not always," Maggie said. "Sometimes punishment isn't losing everything. It's finally seeing what you lost." That evening, Evan called. His voice trembled, but he was calm. "Miss Collins, I met with him." "And?" "He admitted it, then said he wasn't guilty, that things just happened. He always says that when he doesn't want to look in the mirror. He offered me a huge contract, only one condition, my silence." "And what did you say?" "I told him I don't sell stories, not even the painful ones." Maggie closed her eyes. "You did what he never could. You chose dignity." "And you?" he asked softly. "What will you choose?" She smiled faintly. "Light, even if it's small." That night Daniel stayed over. No words, no plans. They just sat side by side, reading in silence. Somewhere between pages, his hand found hers, not to hold it down, but to stay close. And in that quiet moment, Maggie realized love after 60 isn't passion. It's peace that no longer feels frightening.
Night settled over Denver like a held breath. The hotel hallways hummed with quiet lives being lived behind closed doors. Maggie sat by the window, the city lights glittering below. Daniel was asleep on the couch, the lamp still on, as if he didn't trust her dreams to be kind. At 3 a.m. the phone rang.
"Maggie, it's Nora," came the voice. "Richard wants to meet, tomorrow, at the Foundation headquarters." Morning arrived gray and metallic. Richard was already waiting in the Redwood Harbor conference room, surrounded by advisors, glossy brochures, and 2 untouched cups of coffee. "I ordered tea," he said when she entered. "You always liked tea." "And you always liked control," she replied, sitting down. "Let's skip the morality play," he said. "I made mistakes, sure, but we've both lost things." "Not all losses have a price tag," she said quietly. For a moment something flickered in his eyes, not arrogance this time, but exhaustion. "After Emily died," he said, voice low, "I didn't know how to be anything. Not a husband, not a father, not even alive." Her breath caught. That name still cut like broken glass. Emily, their daughter, their only child. She had died at 20, in a car accident Richard survived but never forgave himself for. The crash had split them like glass. She mourned by staying. He mourned by running. "You think you were the only one who suffered?" Maggie said. "You ran from pain. I lived with it. I couldn't look at you. You were everything I'd lost. So you betrayed it, again and again." "I just wanted to forget," he said. His voice shook now, a man unarmed for the first time in decades. "Evan wasn't supposed to exist in this mess." "But he does," Maggie said firmly, "because you never learn to face the things you break." He turned away, staring at the window like it might forgive him. "Some stories," he murmured, "are better left unfinished." "Not the ones that begin with lies," she said. He exhaled, slid a folder across the table. "There's a deal inside. Sign it, and everything disappears. The accusations, the investigation. You get your share, no one gets hurt." She didn't even open it. "It ends when the truth stops hiding." Hours later, the Foundation's media hall filled with journalists. Nora had organized everything. Richard stood off to the side, composed as always, a man who believed reputation was armor. Maggie walked to the podium. Her voice was calm, steady, each word a strike of quiet thunder. "My name is Maggie Collins. I am the co-founder of the Redwood Harbor Foundation. 10 years ago, my name was used to forge documents. My ex-husband turned a charity into a business of exploitation." The room stilled. Even the microphone seemed to hold their breath. "But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because forgiveness is also a form of justice." She paused. Her voice softened. "We lost a daughter, Emily. And somewhere in that grief, he stopped being human. But I found a way back, not through anger, but through truth." At the doorway, Evan appeared, composed but shaking slightly. He stepped forward, laid a hand on Maggie's shoulder. "And so did I," he said. "I'm his son, and I'm done being silent." The room exploded with questions, flashes, voices. But all Maggie saw was Richard, standing pale and still. His lips parted, barely audible. "I didn't want it to look like this." "You didn't want it to be true," she said. Turning back to the crowd, she finished. "We can't always rewrite the past, but we can stop using it as an excuse for the present." Afterwards, outside the hall, Evan found her again. "I saw the way he looked at you," he said softly. "There was regret there. Maybe for the first time, but too late for us. Not for everyone," he said. "You gave me the chance to decide who I want to be." That night the world finally quieted. Maggie sat on the porch of Daniel's bookstore. He brought 2 cups of tea, the steam catching the streetlight. "So," he asked, "is this the end?" She smiled, tired but light. "No," she said, "just a late beginning." He leaned closer. "Your eyes are shining again." "It's not my eyes. It's peace. finally brave enough to stay. She looked up at the sky. A plane blinked overhead, its lights tiny but unwavering. Maybe loss wasn't a curse, she thought. Maybe it was just the way the universe made room for finding yourself again.
6 months later, spring returned to Denver, carrying the smell of rain and roasted coffee, the scent of peace after long storms. On the corner of Pine Avenue, a new sign hung above the door. Emily's Light, Book and Tea Room. Inside, sunlight streamed across wooden tables and shelves lined with well-loved books. Daniel adjusted the display by the window. Evan was wiring a projector to the wall. He'd insisted on helping set up the story evenings. Though job offers poured in after his TV interview, he said this place felt more like home than any office. Maggie stood by the door, watching strangers walk in. Older women with journals, young couples, veterans in worn jackets, students clutching poetry books. Everyone here had a story. Every story began with tea. One morning, the mailman brought a single envelope. No return address. Inside, one page, one key. The handwriting was sharp, controlled, painfully familiar. Maggie, I'm not asking for forgiveness. You gave me something I never had. Silence where I could finally hear myself. I'm leaving you the house in Redwood Harbor, the place where it all began. If you ever go back there, just turn on the light. Maybe I'll find my way too. Richard. Maggie held the letter for a long time, then placed it in the old chest beneath the counter, beside letters from old friends and one faded note from Emily, taped to their refrigerator years ago. Mom, don't be afraid of anything, even if it's scary. That evening, she stepped onto the terrace. Daniel sat nearby with a guitar, not playing, just holding it like something sacred. Remember when you said you'd never love again? He asked. I remember. And now? Maggie smiled. Love after 60 isn't a fire. It's warmth that stays. He nodded. And you stopped running. And you stopped being afraid to stay, she said. A gentle knock interrupted the quiet. Evan stood at the door, holding a small box. For you, something from the new office. I started my own foundation, Harder of Light. We're helping people start over after 60. Her eyes softened. That's a beautiful name. I figured it was time to bring light back to the places that lost it. He paused, his voice thick with meaning. I'm moving to Redwood. They say there's an old house there, big windows, still standing. If you ever visit, the doors will be open. Maybe someday, she said quietly. He smiled and left. Moments later, a light flickered on the horizon, faint, steady, like a beacon. The next morning, Maggie unlocked the bookstore early. The sunlight spilled in golden stripes across the floor. She lit a small lamp near the window, Emily's light, the same one that had once stood in her daughter's room. It glowed softly, not bright but constant, and anyone walking by couldn't help but notice how it shimmered through the glass. Quiet, gentle, like a memory that refused to fade. She inhaled the smell of coffee, turned the sign on the door to open, and smiled at the first visitor stepping in. Do you open this early? He asked. Always. There's always room for early stories. And when Daniel set the kettle on the counter and music began to hum in the background, Maggie thought, maybe victory isn't proving you were right. Maybe it's learning to live again, even when you no longer have to.